Greetings, I am Squish, this is Beer Thunder, and this is War Thunder Sim in the F7F. Now, I did want to make an F7F video to go into all the intricacies of the plane, just kind of showcase like what the plane can do, and I ran into some problems, and those problems are going to be abundantly clear by the rest of the footage, but I do have the one good fight, and I'm going to use this as a reference, because this is one of the things that I like about War Thunder Sim is the PvP combat. We have a 109K4 come in, he merges, we get to equal position. We're holding our speed here, and we're actually going to go up, and we'll do like a little bit of a spiral energy trap. We'll drop our flaps, we'll drop down in on top of him, get good position, get the gun kill, and overall this is a good fight. This is like one of the things that I like. If I could do nothing but fights like this, or even fights like this where I lose and I could analyze my mistakes, I would. Unfortunately, we are playing Sim. Most fights are not like this. Most fights at this tier are not going to be like this because there is a twin-engined, fork-tailed elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is the JU-288. Because the JU-288 exists, it is a plane that is good for grinding. It is a plane that gets consistent rewards. It's a good method for gaining silver lions. And Sim doesn't have a limit on how many bombers can spawn. Now, if you've played AirRB circa 2 years ago when I was really big into it, you might already see the problem. Back when I played AirRB, the JU-288 was really, really popular. And if you played anything 5.7 Germany, you would get up tier to 6.0. And at like 4 out of 6 players on your team would be JU-288s. It meant that you would go into an ARB game, and unless you just like bootstrapped up by your pull-ups, you didn't win the game, and it was very oppressive. Sim is a little bit more nuanced than that. It's a little bit different because games are more persistent, games last longer, objectives stack up. It's really easy for these guys and bombers to just kind of like exist in like random lobbies for a long time and not really have to risk being intercepted. But what this means for me as a person who mainly plays PvP means when I go out to make an F7F video to talk about using the F7F, this is the majority of the stuff. The majority of the stuff is going after JU-288s, and there's only like so many different angles you can attack a JU-288 from and be safe. There are only so many times that you can attack it and then like win and like actually feel satisfied. It means that overall that this tier doesn't get featured on my channel a lot because it really, to me, just isn't satisfying. And because of that, it means that instead of this video being focused about the F7F, it's gonna be focused about the Sim bomber problem, the big bomber conundrum thing. And in order to prep for this, I did like doodle out like an outline, but then I drink some beer and then it goes off the rails. So congratulations, we're gonna go off the rails. Now, Sim players, or vocal Sim players, I'll say people in the Sim community that talk, because the bomber people really don't have like their own community because like they're not passionate about this. Like the people that are passionate are gonna have outspoken opinions like me. Generally speaking, across the board, people that play bombers get like a lot of ire from the Sim community, and I would say like a good portion of it is pretty justified. But people hate bombers for a variety of reasons. But one of the big things to understand within the Sim community is like there's this slight distinction between the Zomber and the bomber, and I think the best way to think of this is like a spectrum, not just like you're either one or the other, because traditionally speaking, back in the good old days when the Sim economy was good, your Zomber players were like literally like Chinese bots running a script where they take off, they fly to the airfield or a bomb point, and they suicide bomb into it, and that was the way to grind the game. It was scripted. It was literally scripted. Not even like it was just a player. No, it's like actual like bots doing that. And I did say Chinese. It might have been Russian. It might have been American. Like let's not give Chinese all the credit. Like any teenager can go to the internet and download like a 3-line script to grind the game for him AFK while he goes to school. So like let's not hate on the Chinese for that. We'll hate on the Chinese because of racism. So anyways, that's kind of like the perspective going into this. Now, why is some of this hate justified though? So the first thing to understand is that bombers in Sim are not like the same. I'm gonna say the word, and I hate the word because it elevates Sim as like a real game mode and like a simulator, but the fidelity of the bomber model, the things that you're doing in a bomber in Sim are by and large virtually identical to AirRB. The implementation in Sim is you have to control the bomber to fly the plane to the objective, but aside from that, your bomb site is still the third-person pinpoint bomb site view. Your gunners, and this is kind of the biggest one that people have a problem with, because most player issues in the game comes down to like balancing, and usually balancing means that the game is unbalanced if you killed me, but the game is balanced if I killed you. That's the way it works out. Player frustration comes down from a lot of the things of like, I killed this guy, and he killed me, but I should have won and he should have lost. Like right here, I flew into a Ju-288 and I think I got hit with a single 13mm by a plane that was on fire and missing a wing. Like if that was realistic to like real life, the one guy who's like controlling the gunner station on a Ju-288 is shitting his pants and going for his parachute, because I mean that's the logical thing to do. It's not really the case. So like this is like a good example of like a kill. I'm like, if I cared, I'd be super frustrated, but because I played the game enough, I don't. It is what it is. Like, Gaiju's not going to change any of this just because like I made a good case for it. But I understand the perspective of newer players, because attacking something like a Ju-288 it's not very easy in AirRB. It's not very easy when both players have mouse aim and have kind of like the same accuracy at range. When you take that and then you reduce accuracy at range by like 50% for one guy, it gets really frustrating. And that's really kind of what it comes down to. This is like literally the only reason that people hate bombers is they kill you when people don't think that they should be killed. Now, just because the source of the grievance with bombers is kind of like at a chemical level, at a brainwave like level, just very, very petty, doesn't really mean that the justification for that is without merit. Because I think when you take a step back and you look at things, we need to acknowledge some factors. Number one, bombers in Sim have a marketed advantage over their counterparts in AirRB. Basically, the scale in Sim is more heavily tilted towards bombers. Now, there's an argument to be made that it's even, it's level-ish. It's an even playing field, and it's skewed in AirRB, and because AirRB exists, and because it's skewed our perception so negatively towards the defensive capabilities of bombers, and there's an argument there. I'm just going to say that there's an argument there. I'm not going to make that because, kind of at the end of the day, I don't particularly care about going out and farming bomber players, and I don't care about really kind of playing too much into that animosity. Like, I'm going to play into animosity. There's way bigger fish to fry than some dude who just wants to bomb targets in the Ju-288 and get points so he can go play like tank RB. Like, I get it. It's understandable. I can sympathize with it. But we should still kind of acknowledge like things I think that are objectively true. And things that are objectively true is having access to third-person view in Sim is an advantage. Having access to gunners that are stabilized, because like the gunners don't shake. You just hold the cursor on with the mouse, and if you can lead correctly, you're probably going to hit your target, is an incredibly like poor implementation from like a simulation perspective, from an emergent perspective. Like there's no gunner view that you're forced into. You're not even forced into like some kind of like pseudo first person view. Like you just have third person, and you hold mouse aim on a plane coming in, and you're good. The other thing is like bombers have like pseudo IFF, where if you switch between like first person view and gunner view, it's gonna move your cursor, like your guns are gonna automatically point at like the nearest enemy. So you know that the guy that's coming in at you from 2 kilometers is an enemy. And the biggest thing that irks me about this, and the biggest thing that irks like other sim players, is that in order to get proficient in fighters, it takes work. It takes a lot of work to get the gunnery down. It takes a lot of work to get the flight skills down. It takes a lot of work to like learn the manual engine controls, and like there's a lot of depth there. You can go down an entire rabbit hole, and it takes a long time to become like truly and honestly proficient. If you're a bomber player, if you're in JU-288, really the only thing you have to do is fly straight, point your tail at a guy, and hold down mouse aim, and you will go probably 1-to-1. It's kind of that easy. And this rabbit hole gets a little bit deeper once a bomber player realizes that they have a omnidirectional third-person view with gunner aim that can shoot off-axis and maneuver at the same time. Like if you've watched any War Thunder bomber montage artists, like a friend Argent from back in the day, he had like a JU-188 montage like that. They would just go in, maneuver with the plane at AirRB, and just use the gunners. And there's a couple of guys that do that. You can do that in Sim as well, and that tactic is a lot more powerful because Sim players are forced to, by the nature of just kind of like the limitations of the game mode, forced to engage you at closer distances. At the same time, it really kind of like, that sums up the individual level, and I'm not super concerned about it. Because it's understandable. I understand why people play JU-288. It's like, it's Gaijin's fault for adding the plane to the game. I understand that. I don't think a lot of people are like super enthusiastic about like prototype late war medium fast bombers that Hitler wanted to maybe like prolong the war for like an extra like 2.5 weeks. I don't think people are interested. They think it's a means to an end for most people. The big thing for me is how it affects like kind of like the collective game, because the collective game is quite bad, if I'd say so myself. And from my perspective, as someone who mainly plays PvP, or plays to enjoy PvP, enjoys like the close fights, like get to like the little clip, I just don't enjoy it. And it means like a lot of battle rating ranges they're dead. They're not populated. They're not going to get players, and it's a constant feedback cycle. The back in the day of AirRB with JU-288 spam, a lot of people just kind of outright stopped playing that tier because you would get up-tiered into JU-288 spam, and the more you played, the more you got into it, and the more awful it was. And I think that in a lot of ways, some of the same stuff happens in Sim. There seems to be a very populated 3.0 to around 5.7 dedicated crew of people that will consistently play PvP for props. And you'll see kind of like a lot of the same people every day of the week. And then once you get to like 6.0 is like still popular. There's some like interesting 6.0 planes, but about 6.3 things start to fall off. And beyond 6.3 up until about, we'll call it 9.0, things are pretty dead. And things are pretty dead not just because of bombers. This is not just purely a bomber problem. This is also a battle rating compression problem, a power capability problem. Because like, does anyone want to load into a game with their ME-262 against some sweaty tryhard in an SU-11? I think most people, their answer would be no. They would not want to do that. But it means that because people are like avoiding things that are unpleasant, and because things are structured in a way that kind of like leads to unpleasantness, it's a constant, kind of like a self-feeding cycle. It self-perpetuates itself. And in order to break it, I don't know how to do it. I can't really just like motivate a bunch of people like, you should play 6.3 because it's like super dynamic and super fun, because like the F7F is like a super cool plane. I can't do that. Also, one of the issues is like Germany doesn't have any planes at above 5.7 for props that are like actually like all that interesting. About 6.3 or 6.7 in Sim, you get the HE-162, which is good, but it's a straight line plane. You go faster. It's jet versus props. That's not really a super interesting gameplay dynamic, if by my estimations. Just something that you understand just kind of inherently. Same thing of like P-47 versus Zero. Not very interesting until you add like more than one plane to it, and then you can kind of make it. Anyways, I'm getting myself distracted. I'm gonna try to get back on topic, and my key point is like things are bad right now. Things aren't particularly great, but it's also not really like a really good, honest to God solution that will address everyone's concerns in the same way. Now, first off, to have any kind of solution, we have to like acknowledge what the problem is, and I'm not entirely sure that there is one, to be honest. Like, I'm going to challenge myself here, and I can complain about bombers. I don't like the fact that people that are brand new at the game are able to kill me fairly easily by using an arbitrary bomber, but I've played props a long time. I've played against bombers. I played against, like, Crab Nation has a thing where he does, like, a gigantic bomber formation, and I've played against him, and I will take out, like, something like a Do 335, some kind of, like, dedicated bomber destroyer plane, and every time we've done that, the guys in the bomber destroyer planes destroy the bombers when they're in formation, when they're doing the things they're supposed to, even with all of the inherent handicaps. So I don't really know that the idea that bombers are inherently overpowered or unbalanced in Sim is really a complaint that has a lot of merit at the end of the day. The same thing can be said with like my gameplay footage here. I'm pretty successful at killing them. I'm not invulnerable, which makes me angry and mad, but also I don't think any of the tactics that I am using, any of the approaches that I'm using, are really unique or inventive. I don't think they're really kind of like beyond the means of most experienced Sim players. Most players that are going to spend the time to learn how to get good at the game mode. Now, ideally, your fighter noob and your bomber noob would have like an equal chance of killing each other in a game mode where they could both learn from the experience, like adapt their tactics and change the way that they play the game based on their experience. And like both players would have like a normal player progression where experience equals skill, and that would be ideal. In War Thunder, with the way the planes are implemented, with just kind of like the nature of the game, with the nature of the matchup, like it just isn't going to be the case. So I am perfectly fine with bombers being a little bit more user-friendly for noobs. With that being said, I don't want to be like a fence sitter and go give you like no conclusion of like, whoa, what would you actually change? Do you have any like real opinions? You just said a bunch of words for like 18 minutes and this didn't like solve anything. And like, one, a lot of the solutions I've seen for the bomber problem are potentially bad. Things like forcing players to use like the AI gunners might be really bad, but also if they buff AI gunners, might be really, really good for bombers and really, really bad for players, depending on how it's done. We're working with Gaijin in theory on this. In reality, Gaijin's not going to change anything. Like, if the game exists the way that it does, and anything that we want changed is kind of pure hopium. The other thing that I've seen suggested, in addition to that, is just having players, like, be able to designate, like, sectors or use, like, commands to, like, prioritize, like, positions. I think those are non-starters. I think that those are programming things that Gaijin would never want to do anyways. So my kind of solution, and a lot of my solutions for everything, because I think that we're working with a development company that doesn't really care about game development, so anything that can't be done by the intern is just not going to happen. Number one of the things I would do is just get rid of the not the third-person view, but get rid of like the turrets auto-slewing to players, auto-slewing to enemy players. So get rid of like the pseudo IFF AWACS function. Get rid of that because it doesn't make any sense anyways. The other thing I would do, if I could do it, if I could get away with it, if there's a way to do it, force gunners into first person. It doesn't have to be like first-person gunner view, like the tail gunner of like an IL-2, where you have like the machine gun and you have to be in that view. Yes, the IL-2 should be forced to that, and not third-person view. But even if you have like the pseudo clear cockpit F-35 kind of translucent view, just doing it from there makes aiming the gunners, it makes it harder. At least in my experience, it does make it harder. It makes it have like a little bit of a learning curve, and that would go a long ways to reduce the kind of like effective range of like bomber gunners when controlled by players. And the last thing that I would do, kind of like across the board for bombers, is to remove the ability to fire the guns from situations that are just not plausible. Like, if you go in, you blow the wing off of a bomber, it is registered as target destroyed. Those guys in the waist turret position are not sticking around until the plane hits the ground to take pot shots at a BF-109 that's like 2 kilometers away. They're not doing it. Like, it makes sense that the guys are like, hey, wing's gone, that plane's not gonna make it, we're getting out of here because we have parachutes. Same thing, like, the plane's on fire, maybe you shouldn't have access to all of your gunners, because maybe the section of the plane that's on fire, the guy near there would be like, hey, I'm gonna put out the fucking fire, because, you know, the planes in real life have, like, fire extinguishers inside. Not everything is completely automated. The other thing is, like, strategic bombers probably shouldn't be able to fire their guns while doing barrel rolls upside down. Most of those guys are not strapped to the floor, not super glued to the floor with Gorilla Tape, that they're going to have access to those. I think that would help things, and it would help kind of, like, the more frustrating situations. Is it going to solve, like, the JU-288 problem? No, I think the JU-288 problem, some of the other bomber stuff, kind of like the way PvE has kind of colored the game across the board, that requires its own unique solution. So we need to, like, compartmentalize our problems and kind of, like, you know, solve them individually, but also realize that, like, our solution might not be to the benefit of everyone and might not solve everything across the board. With that also being said, because this is, if you're smart, you'd be like, wait a second, that's a nerf to bombers. You're making bombers worse. Yes, I'm making bombers worse because I want them to feel more equitable for all of the players. At the same time, I will acknowledge that bomber players probably do have a good point, that the bomber damage models across the board are kind of all over the place. The bomber damage model for, like, a B-17, like, a B-17 is, like, much easier to kill than a JU-288. Like, the JU-288 is like a tank. Like, that thing soaks up damage, puts out fires, does, like, all kinds of things that you take a 109 with, like, a 30 millimeter or even, like, a single 20 millimeter, you shoot, like, wing roots to, like, a B-24, the plane falls out of the sky. Like, I've been there. I'm like, oh, technically, it might be technically realistic. Like, the 30 millimeter, the German 30 millimeter was, like, supposed to, like, kill bombers in, like, 2 to 3 to 4 hits, and maybe our aim within War Thunder is good enough to do that, but I would be fine with it taking 4 to 5 hits if the gunners weren't, like, super laser accurate, if things were a little bit more balanced, because, like, I want bomber players to at least feel like they have a place, even though none of the game modes are, like, designed to, like, exist for any other reason than to break your brain and motivate you to spend money to go to top tier, to go to whatever the end game that you think that it is. I do want those people to feel like that they have, like, a potential for a place. I'm not gonna say a place because I'm a toxic asshole and, like, you don't need to have wholesome content coming from me, but I think the damage models, like, if the changes were made, we could probably go back, look at the damage models, look at the BR ratings, like, hey, maybe the B-17s and stuff, like, hey, they can go down a good bit, because now they're not, like, busted. Same thing with, like, the B-29. If it's not, like, super duper easy to kill people all the time, yeah, maybe it goes down a step. I don't know. Anyways, that's going to be pretty much the conclusion of the video. We're going to kind of finish it out with, like, the most exciting thing that I did. All of my F7F stuff was maximizing fuel to glide back to the aircraft carrier to do a carrier landing. This really was, like, the highlight of the thing. And I do enjoy doing this. I do enjoy carrier landings. And I don't... My frustration is not just with, like, the game or with bomber players. My frustration is with, like, boredom. My frustration is, like, not being able to go out and automatically get good content. Not automatically able to go out and get, like, a game that, like, makes sense. Like, I want the game to have, like, some kind of, like, push and pull. I want the game to be like, oh, hey, a strategic factory objective, like, popped up, and, like, our whole team's gonna, like, rush to defend it. Like, a game that actually does that shit good, or at least did that stuff, kind of stuff good when I played it was like Battlefield. Like Battlefield has like the stupid rush mode where your ability to contest a point to do like the objective like does feel like it has an impact in the game, and that's really kind of boils down to like what my biggest gripe is. Like it feels like more or less most of us are doing fetch quests, and I want to suggest solutions to make the game better, but I mean it's War Thunder, so it'll be dog shit. Anyways, that really is the video. Now, if you like content like this, you need to like and subscribe to the channel. And really, the only reason I'm asking is not because I want the big subscriber count for myself. I want to be able to eventually have enough subscribers to add a monopod bird decal to the game. And to do that, I need to have a bunch of subscribers so that Gaijin will be inclined to like add a funny decal to the game. So subscribe for funny decal.